I'm here.
Yeah, seriously. This would be a fucking disaster if Ripto wasn't all over this shit.
Yeah, I've got my hands in every aspect of every one of these fucking videos. Welcome back to the Starting Strength podcast. We are here today with our buddy, Starting Strength coach Joe Leppo. Joe is in the Navy. We're going to talk to Joe about all kinds of interesting shit today, and let's just see if we get some interesting shit talked about. All right, Joe, what are you doing, man?
Hey, Rip.
Is that your helmet from the Navy behind you there on your, would that be your right hand shoulder?
Absolutely, absolutely.
You wear that at work, right?
I wear it every day.
Okay.
There's
a lot of stuff they don't tell us. You know, there's a whole lot of things that go on in the military that we don't know anything about. And I think this is just evidence of that fact. So, Joe has been a starting strength coach for 3 or 4 years now. He came on board with us early. And being in the Navy, I'm sure everybody's aware of the fact that people that are in the Navy are on a ship half the time. And ships are an interesting place for barbells. First off, Joe, tell us about being in the Navy, and then tell us about how you train on a ship. That's an interesting deal. You know how many excuses we have rolling into the boards all the time about, oh God, they can't do the standing press because after all, their basement is only 8.5 feet tall, and they might touch the ceiling with the plates. So what do I do?
Yeah.
Well, what did you do?
Well,
et cetera.
I took the seminar and qualified as a coach back in, it was January of 2012 at the Atlanta seminar. And I was actually in the States on official travel. I was going to a conference in Philadelphia and kind of was able to hit the seminar while I was back stateside. I was stationed in Japan at the time. Really what I've had to do on sea duty is just kind of adopt the attitude, do what I can when I can. It's never going to be optimal in that kind of situation. So at the time, in 2012, I was on the 7th Fleet staff, and that's in Yokosuka, Japan, on an older amphibious ship, the Blue Ridge. Now, they had no squad
Just out of curiosity, what rank do you hold, and what is your actual job in the Navy?
Right now, I'm a commander in 05. My current job is current operations director for 4th Fleet in Mayport, Florida. But going back, so, that ship, they had a decent weight room, but, a lot of machines, a couple benches, one Smith machine, no squat rack. But, me and a couple of the guys that wanted to squat kind of figured out, hey, if I use the plate storage on the back of that Smith machine, I can, make it into a power rack out of it. Or, hey, I don't have the weights I need, I don't have the equipment we need, so I'm going to make this temporary substitution, at least so I can get some training in. I did a lot of leg pressing. When seas were rough, I hopped in those machines and, did some biceps. But whenever I was in port or whenever the opportunity presented itself, I'd always go back to the core Big 5 exercises, and that's how I track my progression, not on the accessory work or the ad hoc stuff I had to do.
Right, so you just made do.
Yeah. I mean, you can make an excuse and not train, or you can find something. And, there's times where all I could do was some push-ups or maybe jump rope, or, hey, I'm going to get really good at running sprints on that treadmill this week. But you've got to do something.
Do what you can do. I mean, the circumstances dictate your ability to perform this schedule of training exercises. You just make do with what you can do. The problem, of course, is making do when you don't have to. I mean, guys that had rather leg press than squat, we don't have a lot of patience for that. But by the same token, if it's a choice between leg presses and, eating donuts, you leg press, right?
That's how I approached it. And, I think my list would absolutely be further along, if I was on shore duty or I do a regular schedule, but I can't. That's not my life. I'm career Navy, and I do what I can when I can and move forward. And even, not doing it optimally, I've seen pretty substantial increases in both mass and strength and my day-to-day functionality over the years.
Well, that's typical of the reports. I mean, just the process is the process. There's an optimal way to do the process, and then there is a suboptimal way to do the process, and sometimes circumstances dictate that the process is approached suboptimally. But we don't fool ourselves into thinking that the suboptimal is the optimal just because that's the way you'd rather do it. And I think Joe's proven this to us. Joe, you've had some interesting. Tell us about the sub service, okay? Now, submarines are interesting to lots of guys. Lots of guys like me and Nick and lots of other guys watching this thing are interested in the submarine service because it's as close to being on a starship as you'll ever get, probably in this lifetime. So we're all interested in this. Tell us about it.
Okay, well,
I mean, all this training shit's real interesting and everything.
Yeah.
But I'd rather hear about the submarines.
Okay, well, I was when I was enlisted in the Navy before I was commissioned. So I was a machinist mate. I was on the USS San Francisco, a fast attack boat from. I got there late '96, but I left real early '98. So about 18 months on board, deployment. It's interesting. I don't want to ruin the illusion for you, but a lot of it is you build a routine and it's, you follow the routine.
Well, that's the way it is on the Enterprise.
Yeah. I mean, I had.
We see the shows and stuff, but the part of the duty that happens between the shows is what you're talking about right here.
Yeah.
We're not always fighting the Klingons.
Correct.
Right.
They're not always. You're not always moving torpedoes around. 99.9% of the time, the reactor is unchanged, and we just cruise along.
Which is good.
Which is very good.
Which is good.
It's people always The question I always get about the submarines is people always ask me, what's the longest I was ever underwater? What's the longest?
Some of this stuff you may not be able to tell us about. Is any of this classified? I don't want to get you in trouble.
Oh no, I won't say anything that's classified. Don't worry.
Good.
I want to retire as a commander.
You have apparently a better perception of what you should and should not say than our former Secretary of State. So I'll just trust you to stay out of Leavenworth by telling us only that which you have the freedom to transmit. So you're underwater how long?
The longest I went without breathing fresh air or seeing the sun was about 3 months.
That's a hell of a long time.
But here's the thing. It's just the routine. One thing that is interesting that a lot of people don't know that have been on submarines is submarines run on an 18-hour day, regardless. So you're on watch for 6 hours and then 12 hours off. Now, that 12 hours off is when you eat, when you sleep, training, drills, etc. But it's an 18-hour day. So
the diurnal cycle has to reset to 18 from 24.
Well, after a couple days, you literally have to look at your watch to know what day it is. I mean, sure everything was timed on when do I have watch next, or when do I eat next? To be honest with you, that's the highlight of submarine service is the meals.
What do they feed you? Pretty good, or I mean, the replicators,
Well, those replicators, I think, are stuck on high carb, high starch, and a lot of fried food.
Well, but we need to speak with Jordy about this.
Yeah, the food on the food on submarines is definitely better than surface ships. I can tell you that, no question. But it's also a smaller crew. It's it's easier to cook for 130 people than it is, 500 or 5,000.
Right, 5,000 people on a ship. Can you imagine such a thing?
One squat rack, by the way, on that carrier.
I mean, the Royal Navy, at the height of the Napoleonic Wars, a first-rate man of war had a crew of about 950 people. Now, think about that. This is a sailing ship, a big wooden affair that might have had 80 guns, the biggest of which were 36-pound guns, with a crew of almost 1,000 people in the 18 teens. That's a fascinating thing that we've lost, isn't it?
It is.
All that whole set of technology is just gone.
Yeah.
It's been replaced, but it was the most complicated object on the face of the earth at the time in which it was in function. And that's just fascinating to me. But I don't know, a nuclear submarine is pretty damn complicated now, right? 130 people, and you're underwater 3 months at a time. And this, of course, hadn't got anything to do with strength training, so y'all just calm down here. All right, I'm interested in this. What do you do about the air? How do you scrub the air? How is that done?
There's literally, you take seawater and you split it into oxygen and hydrogen and expel the
hydrolyze
hydrogen. Yeah, so you have
oxygen out of that.
Fresh oxygen coming in, and then there's CO2 scrubbers. That mechanically remove the CO2 from the air. I mean, the air quality on the submarine is, I mean, it's pure. I mean, there's no pollution. It's really clean.
Mm-hmm.
But it is recycled until, you surface, and then you'll change out the air when you surface.
Well, this is probably impossible for you to answer, but does it smell different? Does the air in a submarine smell different than the air here at Wichita Falls Athletic Club?
It does, because some of the chemicals used in the scrubbers, and then just the machinery smell from oil and machinery. It's not a bad smell, but after a couple hours on the sub, you don't notice it anymore. Mm-hmm. But when I come home from the sub, or I was single at the time, when we go out on Liberty, you made sure you went and really showered well and scrubbed to get rid of that smell. It's not a bad smell. It's
just a machine.
It's like a machine shop smell.
Lubricant, that sort of thing. Well, that's interesting. That's interesting. So, how deep do you run when you're? Is there an average depth that the boat stays?
That I cannot talk about.
Finally.
That's cool.
Hillary would tell me.
Well, if she
just put it in an email. She just email it. So, Joe, just email it to me, okay? You want to do that?
I got my private server over there.
Excellent. Yeah, in your bathroom.
If you look at Jane's, or if you just do a Wikipedia search, without going into specifics, that'll give you some idea.
Well, I would imagine that you've got to be deep enough. There's probably a level at which the boat does not feel surface weather. And that's probably going to be, 40 meters, something like that, where it doesn't matter what's going on top, the boat doesn't feel any of the energy from any wave action or something like that. So for an indefinite, for a long stay, it's got to be below that level. So whatever the hell that is, it's probably down in the still water. And it's probably fairly dark down there too, because I think all the lights gone or most of the lights gone at 120 feet, something to that effect. So it's probably down in that area. And I'm sure it varies with the proximity to land masses and underwater topography, that sort of thing. Yeah. But it's what a fascinating deal. What a little self-contained deal with a hostile environment outside. I mean, they ought to make a show about that, don't they?
Yeah, I don't know how.
What was The Hunt for Red October was a great movie.
It is a great movie.
That's a great movie. How realistic is Hunt for Red October?
Not very.
It's all bullshit.
I mean, no, I wouldn't go that far. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff. Look, as a former submariner, I love that movie. All right, it's a fun movie to watch. There's some good stuff in there.
Well, and I've got a buddy that's a B-52 pilot that worked for SAC during the Cold War, and he said that all of his buddies, their favorite movie was Dr. Strangelove.
Yeah,
and it's all complete bullshit, but they just loved it anyway. you know.
Yeah, the precious fluids.
Oh God. Oh man. Oh, that's a great film. Those of you who have not seen Doctor Strangelove, I'm just telling you, you're morons. You got to get caught up on that because it's a great film. Peter Sellers played like what 9 different roles in the thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh God, what an amazing deal. All right, so enough of that shit. This is my video. Okay. Now, let's get back to something at least topical. Did you coach people on board ship? And if so, how did that get done?
So when we left off before, I was on a ship that really didn't have the equipment at all. When I moved over to the carrier, to the George Washington, they did have a decent sized free weight room. We called it Martha's Gym. And they had one squat rack. And really the only thing on that ship I couldn't do was cleans. And, we had those goddamn 8-point octagonal plates, with the ship moving and the equipment wasn't good. I mean, it's lowest bid or cheapest, but we were able to get in there and squat and press and bench and deadlift. And I did a lot of coaching of the squat and the deadlift. That was usually what people came to me, and really it was more people saw me squatting, and then my boss on the carrier was one of my trainees. And he's actually a pretty strong guy. He's a diver EOD guy. Diver ED guy, engineering duty officer guy. So we'd go up there and squat, and they'd see the two old commanders squatting, and people would ask. And I got a lot of experience coaching squat and deadlift that way. Not so many people are interested in the press.
Well, the moment arm from the ground to overhead is long on a press, and on a moving deck that kind of could be a liability. So you're below decks when you're coaching. What do you do about how much does the ship roll, and what do you do about that during a set?
Well, I've only done the one carrier tour. Most of my other tours were smaller ships, so your carrier doesn't really move, the way a destroyer or a cruiser does. But when you have, a heavy bar on your back, and whatever heavy is for you, whether it's 225 or 405. A degree or two of the floor moving makes a huge difference.
I'm sure it does.
And,
I'm sure it does.
A lot of times we would just say, screw it, we're going to squat. And if the ship rolls, we had the safety set up properly. On the days
spotters just grab it and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I found it easier just to use the safeties and just have one guy behind me in case you started to fall backwards.
Right.
But if it was that rough, we usually didn't squat. If it was, if it was kind of borderline on whether we're going to squat or not, we just take some weight off the bar, maybe do some extra reps. But that extra motion, made the exercise much more difficult. So you're still getting a good workout.
It's an unstable surface. That makes it functional.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
functional training.
That makes it functional. So that makes it, like better that you're lifting like lighter weights.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The fact that you're not as strong that day as you're producing as much force today is okay.
Yeah.
Right. Right. So the carrier doesn't move. Is that just by virtue of the mass of the carrier and the depth of the keel between what be the draw of the ship, the draft of the ship, or is it a function of equipment that they've installed to keep it from moving? Or it's
it's the size,
just the mass,
sheer size,
mass of the damn thing.
I mean, the carrier displaces over 100,000 tons. A cruiser is 10,000. Right. And I mean, don't get me wrong, it moves, and when we're in some rough weather, there's people that are not feeling real well, but it doesn't move the way a small ship does.
Well, is it a slower movement?
Yeah, slower and less amplitude.
Right.
So I mean, I've been on destroyers where we were rocking and rolling 20 to 25 degrees. Every 30 seconds, and everybody feels bad. And you got a carrier, and it's a couple degrees every few minutes.
I've got a buddy from Iceland, and in Iceland, top tier job is in the fishing industry. And we went up to visit a friend of his one time, who was working on a fishing boat, and this is like probably 120-foot boat.
Yeah.
And they're out 6 weeks at a time. interesting that they're fishing in the Arctic and the North Atlantic, and they cool the fish with ice. So from the time the first fish goes in the hold, they have 6 weeks to get back in, because that's the lifespan of the cargo.
Okay.
And I asked him, Tommy's his name. I asked Tommy, I said, what, just out of curiosity, Tommy, what is the biggest sea that you have ever been in? And, I want to know that, and for those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, it's the distance from the top of the wave to the bottom of the trough associated with the wave. And he thought about it a minute, real matter of fact. He said, 30 meters. 30 meters in a 120-foot boat. I don't, just real matter of fact. That's crazy, okay? That's for crazy people. But anyway, so training on the ship is kind of an interesting adaptation, an interesting set of adaptations that you have to make to the material that we teach. And how successful were you at making this adaptation? People get strong when you're training them on ship?
Absolutely. Now, most of the people I coached, they'd say, "Hey, Joe, come, or sir, come look at my squad. Hey, can you give me some advice?" But I had a handful of people that I trained with regularly, like I mentioned, including my boss, and we all made substantial progress. I mean, my all-time PR was set on the ship at a shipboard powerlifting meet. So absolutely. I mean, we would have progressed better, faster, stronger on shore, but we trained the best we could with what we had, and we made progress doing the program to the best of our ability.
Which goes to show all of you, in fact, we have an upcoming article about this, that the program, even if done badly, works better than anybody else's program. We're just adding a little weight. You add weight to the extent that you can add it on as regular a basis as you can, and mathematically everything goes up, because it has to, because you're not giving it an option to not go up. And this is, if it works on a ship, maybe it'll work in your basement, So, well, that's interesting. Well, Joe, tell us about your recent injury. You've got an adductor tear, kind of a nasty thing that occurs every once in a while.
Yeah.
When we train. Tell us how that happened and what you did about it.
Well, we talked about, the Navy, the military in general. I don't care what branch of service. There's going to be periods where your training's interrupted, deployment, travel. So I finished my last deployment December of 14, and then the first half of 15 was awful for me training-wise. Just the workload as the ship was in the yards, and then I transferred, moving from Japan back to the States. So finally got settled in Florida, dipped into my piggy bank and sent Rogue a bunch of money and set up my home gym the way I always wanted it, and went back to doing the program, strict LP, to try and get my numbers back up, close to where I was before when I was following some intermediate programming. And, I think I had a bad day. I think I just hadn't previously recovered from the previous workouts, or I might have been a little greedy, and, maybe I should have cut back my LP sooner than I did. But 345, which for me is relatively heavy right now. This happened November 1st, the injury. I got the first set done, and I felt an uncomfortable twang is the best way I can describe it during the first set. It wasn't, soreness or fatigue. It was something wrong. Mm-hmm. And I had that stubborn streak, debating, do I continue on, or do I just lift the weight?
Well, and, most guys like us will say, look, just get under the bar.
That's exactly what I said.
Get under the bar.
Exactly.
And as a result of that, you and I have hurt ourselves, haven't we?
Yeah. So, I remember sitting there thinking, I'll be fine. I'll take an extra 2 or 3 minutes of rest, so I'll rest 10 minutes instead of 7 or 8. And I didn't have any trouble making the reps. I'll be fine. And I got into that rack And the first rep, I was about 3/4 of the way down, and I mean, I felt the tear. It's difficult to describe the pain. I knew exactly what I'd done. And
Right.
if, a note to all you boys and girls at home, set up your safeties if you're squatting alone, because if those safeties hadn't been there, I would have been stapled. There was no human
Well,
way
and
to
the
resist
tear
that
would have been a
motion.
hell of a
Yeah.
lot worse too.
Yeah. So I kind of came down hard, bought the safeties caught the bar, and I was on the floor for a few minutes, and I suspected what I'd done. So I took a minute, caught my breath, took my belt off, and then I thought about it for a few minutes, and drove myself to the emergency room because I wanted good drugs for the pain. So that was that was.
And I think you probably learned something about driving yourself to the emergency room after you tear a muscle under the barbell.
Well, yeah,
This would
the
be the
funny
only
thing-
time you do that, probably. Yeah.
So I've got this big bag of ice, and it's my groin. So I'm trying to ice the injury without icing the equipment.
Yeah.
So I've got the
Your
ice.
nads are going to get small.
Yeah, yeah. And then it's a 40-minute drive.
They're going to draw a little bit.
Yes. There was shrinkage.
Yes, they'll be shrinking.
So, I got to the emergency room, and they did. They confirmed what it was. The ER doc was kind enough to actually do a sonogram and make sure it wasn't completely severed, but I was in enough pain that I knew it wasn't. And, and then I took a couple days, and I called you to discuss it. That's the advantage of being a starting strength coach. Is it's always great to get a
starting strength coaches have a pipeline.
Yeah.
I don't know how valuable it is, but the pipeline is there. So.
Well, sometimes even when you know what you need to do, it's great to bounce an idea off somebody who has more experience than you,
Sure.
or has. I mean, I know you've dealt with abductor tears with other clients before. I mean,
Well, and
So-
had you called me when it happened, I would have saved you the trip to the ER.
I wanted those drugs, Rip.
I
They
would have
worked.
said, look, you can get drugs. You can get drugs. Hillary can get you drugs. So what I would have told you had you called me right then is I would have said, Joe, just ice it. Get back in the house and keep ice on that thing, 20 on, 20 off for the next 48 hours. And then let's see how bad the thing is bled. Let's see how far down the leg it is, and let's just see if it's going to be either 3 or 4 days before you have to start squatting again on this tear, because it is pointless to go to the ER. Had it been severed, now had it been completely separated, it probably wouldn't have hurt nearly as bad as it did. And at that point, I don't know. I have never heard of a complete adductor rupture being repaired. I think they just say, well, you're going to have
That's it?
you got a defect.
Yeah.
You're going to have a defect. But I would have certainly saved you the trip to the hospital, especially at 40-minute ride in the car. That probably wasn't very much fun, was it?
Once I was in the car, and I have a pickup truck too, so you got to kind of climb up into it. Right. Once I was in the chair, I was fine. It was getting in and out of the truck that was
that movement.
The fun part.
And I'll tell you, boys and girls, you have no idea until you tear an adductor how many things the adductor does during the day. Isn't that right,
It's
Joe?
a true statement.
You have no idea what that thing does. It's every time you sneeze or chew or cough or think, the damn thing hurts. Just the slightest little deal makes that thing hurt. And it's just that's an anatomy lesson. It really is. So what'd you do, Joe?
Well, I think I called you. I did it Monday night, and I ended up calling you Wednesday afternoon before I left work. I kind of know you get it. I kind of know your schedule a little bit, so I knew you'd be around then. And as soon as I talked to you, I was sorry I called because you made me squat that night. I was actually going to wait another day before I tried. But for those of you listen to this later, I call Rip, and he's like, "Damn it, Joe! You know what I'm going to tell you? You got to get out there and squat on it." And then the next thing he asked me is, "What time are you going to squat?" So now I'm committed. Now I've got to leave work and go home. I got to squat, and then I got to call him as soon as I finish the first set. So there was no way out of it. And I'd used the STAR rehab protocol before, but It's never pleasant, and this was particularly rough those first couple of days.
Oh, yes, it is. I remember, I remember tearing both of my graciluses at the same time. That was the day, the heaviest set of squats I've ever done, 600 for triple. I injured both of my graciluses doing that. And guess who made me squat 3 days later?
I'm guessing Star. But,
Stark.
Yeah.
Stark was standing there, and you got to get back on this. And sure enough, it only took, I was fine in about 3 weeks as a result of that. As a result of getting immediately back under the bar. It was not pleasant, but it does work very well.
Yeah, those first couple days, I mean, I'm not kidding. I mean, I was making all kinds of weird sounds.
I'll bet.
My eyes might have been watering a little bit.
You
but
were probably expressing dissatisfaction with the prescription, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
Well, how are you now?
But I knew it worked.
But how are you now?
Oh, it's
All healed up?
I squatted 345 for 5 for 3 sets for, Friday night.
Finally.
So 9 weeks. So
well,
it cost
we're
me
glad.
9 weeks.
We're glad to hear that.
But
we're
going
glad
back
to
to
hear
the rehab protocol, even after the first 5 or 6 days, my day-to-day activities, getting out of the truck, walking around at work, after 6-7 days, all that pain had gone away.
Right.
And it only hurt when I worked the injury. And then when I finished, so 14 days of the protocol, and then I was back to squatting. I just picked up 3 sets of 5 where I ended with the rehab protocol. And I was starting to get a little tightness, a little twinge there. Narrowed the stance a little bit, toes forward a little bit more than usual, and went down to squatting 2 days a week. And then, over the course of a few more weeks, all my pain and symptoms went away. And now I'm back, moving up in weight.
And for those of you that are going to ask the question on the comment section about this video, about the stance and the toe angle, all that stuff, it's in the book. It's in the book. Look it up in the book. So everything seems to be fine now, and you're progressing right along. Very nice, Joe. Very nice.
Yeah, I'm going to start with back to the. Either I haven't decided if I'm going to do a 4-day split or a 3-day team, but I've already kind of had to move my press and my to an intermediate program to prevent stalling, and squat and deadlifts right behind.
Okay.
So I'm happy with where I am. Hopefully 6 months from now I'll be a lot stronger.
Well, good. Listen, we're happy that you decided to share some stories with us today on the podcast. We'll talk to you soon. I guess I'll see you at an audit here sometime here pretty quick. But at any rate, it's been good talking to you, Joe. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Rick.
And thank you for watching us on the podcast today. We'll see you next time.